Good evening, everyone. It is Gordon Gauzy, as always, aka Gordy Canuck on Twitter, Grow a Set on Reddit, uh, Gordon Gauzy on Facebook, and it is 11:44 p.m. on Saturday, the 12th of November, and I'm going to cut right to it with respect to my suggestion. We've all heard the rumblings about the possibility of mask mandates being reintroduced across Canada. I welcome anyone watching this from the US. I think this could work in the United States as well if you live in a jurisdiction where they're talking about bringing in mask mandates as well. I think California is a big mask loving state, at least amongst some. And so, cutting right to the chase, it's a battle for public opinion. And right now, I would submit that the majority are opposed to masking mandates. And as evidence for that, I work in a retail environment now. I have since May. And it's 1 in 5, 1 in 4 people are wearing a mask. 75 to 80% of the general public, at least that I see out and about, are going unmasked, which kind of flies in the face of recent polling, which suggests that a half to 2/3 of Canadians favor a return to masking mandates, which seems odd given that most faces are unmasked. But leaving that aside, I'll talk about that later. But it's a battle for public opinion. So what I'm going to suggest is this. If you work at a place where there's a lunchroom, where there's a health and safety bulletin board, I'm going to suggest all you need for this is a computer, a printer, and a highlighter. And I've linked it below, and I've shared this article before. I've shared the information before, but not this suggestion. It's an article from CBC News out of one of their New Brunswick affiliate, but it's CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. You don't get any more mainstream than this. And this is an article that is quoting a University of Toronto infection control epidemiologist. And what he brings to light, and this was brought to light all the way back in May of 2020, is the potential for serious harm from masking. And the article's down below. The title of the article is Use of Masks During COVID-19, Not Always the Answer, says epidemiologist. And if you scroll down to the part where it says study point to dangers, it quotes this University of Toronto infection control epidemiologist. His name is Dr. Colin Furness. He said a study in a UK medical journal showed healthcare workers who wore cloth masks all day while working were 13 times more likely to get a respiratory illness when compared to the standard practice of only wearing a mask when necessary. Those who wore a paper or procedure mask were twice as likely to get some type of respiratory infection if they wore it all day. The N95 masks were only worn when required during the study, and no staff were affected. And then it quotes Dr. Furness. This shouldn't surprise us, Furness said. A mask, you're breathing on it all day long, creating all this wonderful space for bacteria to multiply. And once they get to a certain quantity, you start inhaling them. And what I would suggest is printing this article off, the entire thing, and highlighting these paragraphs, especially a mask, that quote, a mask, you're breathing on it all day long, creating all this wonderful space for bacteria to multiply. And once they get to a certain quantity, you start inhaling them. And you might even want to highlight, there's a section further down where he says he boils his masks after just 2 hours of use. And that is because in this study he's referencing, it was published to the British Medical Journal, and you can pull that study up as well, pin it to a bulletin board at your workplace, share it around. The British Medical Journal published study, peer-reviewed science, found that the healthcare workers referenced, they were wearing their masks for just 4 hours a day. And the article, it talks about wearing all day. Well, all day in this study was 4 hours per day, per working day over the 4-week study period. So that's one little bit. And I'm going to assume at this moment that anyone watching this video, that I'm preaching to the choir. That is to say, I'm talking to people who are already opposed to mandatory masking mandates. And that's perfect. That's exactly the audience I want to address, because we can become somewhat evangelists, if you will, and share this information out there. And there is more. I've included another article linked down below from the Annals of Internal Medicine. And that's the link that starts ACP Journals. This is the Annals of Internal Medicine. And the only problem with this article is it leaves it, the authors have a distinct bias in favor of masks. They ultimately recommend masks, although they say there's no direct evidence indicating that cloth masks are effective in reducing transmission of SARS-CoV-2. There are numerous little snippets in here talking about the fact that masks there's no empirical evidence proving that they work, and they also mention the possibility of harm. What they say, and you can find this quote in that article: no direct evidence indicates that public mask wearing protects either the wearer or others. But then they say, given the severity of this pandemic and the difficulty of control, we suggest that the possible benefit of a modest reduction in transmission likely outweighs the possibility of harm. That's guesswork on steroids. So they're saying we have zero evidence, no direct evidence whatsoever, showing that public mask wearing protects either the people wearing them or others. But they say that given the severity of this pandemic and the difficulty of control, we suggest that the possible benefit of a modest reduction in transmission likely outweighs the possibility of harm. In other words, they're at least they're being honest about their bias. But unfortunately, in today's world, people latch on to that which confirms. If something reinforces their fear and confirms their bias, they'll jump all over it. There's another article that I didn't link below that occurred to me after I posted that I was doing this video. And that was from the Ontario Nursing Association. It was published, if memory serves, and I have a pretty good memory, it was January 25th of 2021. And the Ontario Nursing Association wrote an open letter to Doug Ford. And it was complaining that despite all the masking and PPE that medical professionals, nurses and healthcare workers, despite all the PPE they wear, which is masks, gowns, gloves, shields, despite all that and training on how to use it properly, they were still getting infected at ever increasing rates. What's the point? Now, in that letter, they were advocating, complaining. They wanted the Ford government to mandate for healthcare workers at minimum N95 respirators as a bare minimum. Of course, the Ford government doesn't want to do that because N95s, I don't know what they would cost in a bulk purchase for you and me, going to a Home Depot or other retail outlet. If you're buying an N95, it's going to cost you $1 to $2 each, and you can't wear them all day. And as soon as you touch the outside material, you've contaminated it, and it should be thrown out, and you should be washing your hands. And another article you can print out and highlight is, if people are going to wear a mask, well, do it properly. Do it the way the World Health Organization recommends, only handling the mask by the loops, never touching the outside material. If the outside material is touched, immediately wash your hands or use hand sanitizer. And no one does all that stuff. So it's time to get in your face with people. And I find that CBC article, I've talked to a number of people about it in the past couple of days. And the eyebrow raising is unbelievable because people think it's, a benefit. And then they find out it has potential for harm. And especially when you're dealing with children in a school setting where kids are typically in school for in and around 6 hours a day. Maybe they get half an hour, 45 minutes for lunch, maybe half an hour or so for recess. And they're in that disgusting mask, sucking on it all day for 4 or 5 plus hours a day. And again, that wonderful quote by Dr. Furness, how, a mask, you're breathing on it all day long, creating all this wonderful space for bacteria to multiply. And once they get to a certain quantity, you start inhaling them. And I didn't read the next sentence. He said drug-resistant bacteria could be worse than COVID-19 for some people. And that's another element to this is, I think most people are aware of the fact that the hyper use of hand sanitizer and other cleansers, and everyone's sanitizing the world right now, that even before COVID, experts in infectious disease were saying that this was creating the potential for more superbugs, pathogens, bacteria that are resistant to drugs. And so we've got to get loud, and we've got to be out there. And this is a somewhat passive way to do it. And I will suggest, if you're either unwilling or unable to do this, understood, but maybe someone else is, share this. I don't mind you sharing my video. I've said it before. I like the likes. I like the shares. Who doesn't? It sends off little dopamine rushes in the brain. I don't want to see everyone, especially kids. That's the one that really bothers me. And you even see parents putting masks on their kids, and they break all the rules because you're never supposed to handle another individual's mask, even your kids. You're not supposed to do it. A lot of people will have seen the videos of daycare workers forcing masks onto toddlers. It's criminal, and we can't be quiet. We can't be quiet about it. I know, I get it. People are like, they don't want to confront. They don't want to put it out there because people's backs get up. Oh, I don't want to hear it. The masks are effective. I read it. This is a way to get it out there that masks can do harm. So share that article. Go in Ontario Nursing Association open letter, Doug Ford, masking. Just do a Google, you can find it. If you ask for it down in the comments below, I will share that as well. I'll share the CDC guidance prior to COVID coming along, showing their meta-analysis of, actually, I did an earlier video, I thought it was 10 randomized control trials that they looked at. It was actually 14. And out of the 14, as it turned out, there was one that showed a very modest benefit. One. 13 showed none. No statistically significant benefit. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask, flip a coin. You're going to get sick. One did show a modest benefit, but as I mentioned in that video, the highest level of science is replication. When you take a randomized controlled trial and you show you get the same results repeatedly. So 13 times you get no benefit. One time you get modest benefit. And I know the way it works in today's world, people will go, well, that one, I'm ignoring the other 13. I'm going to fixate on that one. I wanted to talk a little bit about the polling as well that you're seeing. I'm trying to remember, I think it was Forum Research did a poll that was published to CTV News. And in that poll, they said 62% of Canadians favor the reintroduction of mask mandates. They either strongly support or somewhat support. 38% were opposed, either strongly opposed or somewhat opposed. And then after that report, Main Street Research or Forum, another polling organization, was engaged by the Toronto Star, and they found it much closer to 50-50. I think it was 53% in favor versus 47% opposed. And they said in their polling, they said 28%, more than 1 in 4. And I think Toronto Star's polling was strictly for the province of Ontario. They said that fully 28% would never go back to wearing a mask. And we need that number to grow. And I do believe that the majority of the population doesn't want to wear masks. However, how do they get these numbers? Is it a made-up poll? Having studied political science at university, polling is a big part of politics. And this whole pandemic has been about science, political science, not medical science, political science. And if you're conducting a poll and you want a certain result, how you frame the question will go a long way to determining the outcome. So if you want people saying that they would favor a return to masking mandates, you would load up your question and say, with Ontario hospitals being overwhelmed and with pediatric ICUs being over capacity, with some children being forced to go into adult intensive care units, would you support Ontario reintroducing a mask mandate to alleviate the pressure on the healthcare system? Puts it in that's going to soften up the respondent to give the answer you want. If you want to push it the other way, are you in favor of the government forcing people to wear masks even if they are opposed? Then you're probably going to get more people saying no. You can do the same thing with this climate change stuff and the carbon tax. If you want to push the carbon tax, if you want the polling numbers to show support for a carbon tax, you would frame the question along the lines of, do you support the government introducing taxation policy that would place a premium on cleaning up the planet and providing less pollution in the air by making the cost of pollutants like fuel and heating more expensive? And you're going to get more people that way. And if you want people to be opposed, you say, are you in favor of the Trudeau government pushing more Canadians into poverty by raising gas and home heating costs? And you're going to get a lot more people saying no. So how you frame the question, it's called push polling. Outlaw Guitar Slinger says, number 2 loves you, man. Whatever that means. But thank you for the comment anyway. So again, be loud. And if you don't want to be loud, print these articles off. Highlight the appropriate sections about the harm, especially that CBC article. Highlight the section about how a mask, you're breathing on it all day long, creating all this wonderful space for bacteria to multiply. And once they get to a certain quantity, you start to inhale them. And he said that drug-resistant bacteria could be worse than COVID-19 for some people. Who wants a drug-resistant bacterial infection? Not me. So that's the end of my video. Make it really short and sweet. For me, short and sweet is under half an hour. God bless everyone. It's now Sunday, the Lord's Day. The Lord's Day is every day. If you can get out to church, I would strongly recommend it. And hopefully we can keep the masks off our faces. Thanks for chiming in, Outlaw Guitar Slinger. Night all.